Glad to be back with you today after a few days off. Marie Sanderson joins us. Always enjoy the conversations with Marie. You know that she is a former strategist with the Republican Governors Association. She's been around state politics. She's been around at D.C. politics. She knows what's going on. Always enjoy the time. Marie, good morning. Thanks for being with us on a Monday.
Good morning, Richard. Happy Monday.
To you as well. I am genuinely at a loss on where to start. It feels like summertime's when things slow down a little bit, but I think the tweet that was, or the statement that just came out from Chris Murphy, the Democrat senator from Connecticut, that's kind of grabbed my attention. It's something I was thinking about throughout the day yesterday. Is that okay? We've got the stuff going on in Los Angeles. Where's next? Who else is going to join in on this? And here we go. Chris Murphy, we are going to rise this moment by being out there on the streets. Are we staring 2020, summer of 2020, all over in the face right now?
I think it's interesting that the senator chose to get involved because there was certainly a dynamic this weekend between the governor of California and the president. And it feels like that the Democrats are taking a shot at this issue because they think there's some momentum. No doubt President Trump had the different voting blocks from young adults to Latino voters are all with him in the last election. So the Democrats must think they have some opening here. But I will tell you that, I'm like you, I tend to go down a rabbit hole, not saying that you do, but I went and looked at some of the tweets and then looked at what people were saying. And I found that on some of these tweets that were, accusing the president of going too far, you had lots of Americans that piled back on saying, I'm for this. I voted for this. And I think Americans want a legal immigration process. And I think it's very interesting that the Democrats are trying to weaponize what's going on right now across the country.
It's fascinating to me. I don't know if you saw the press conference late last night from the Los Angeles police chief, who used a lot of words to ultimately get around to saying, this thing's gotten out of control and we may have to reevaluate our stance on the National Guard. So Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, quote tweeted that or quote posted that, and he said, let's get this straight. One, local law enforcement didn't need help. Two, Trump sent troops anyway. Three, Trump succeeded in manufacturing chaos and violence. And four, now things are destabilized and we need to send in more law enforcement just to clean up Trump's mess. That's how they're spinning it.
Yeah. Look, it's the president's prerogative to send in the National Guard. He did it for safety. He had, I'm sure, his cabinet at the table, Secretary Noem, AG Pam Bondi, evaluating the situation. It was the right thing to do. And, no governor likes the federal government coming in and taking care of business. So it doesn't look good. So if I'm Gavin Newsom, I don't like the fact that the president has to come in and save me, but that's exactly what happened.
What do we do with the? It feels like it cooled off a little bit yesterday, but this mess between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. I think there are reasonable minds that can say Donald Trump does not get elected this past year if Elon Musk does not come on board in the way he did. Maybe not everybody agrees that, but certainly a lot of people think that is the case. But there are a lot of people that said, hey, this was inevitable. These are two big personalities, two highly successful people. This kumbaya friendship remaining in perpetuity can't last. What do you make of the whole thing?
My opinion only. The president has surrounds himself with strong people, and over time, uh, those people tend to move on to other things. I think that Elon Musk was an ally, and I think the president understands the role he played in his election. I also think that Elon Musk, is and was a big personality as it related to Doge. He did a lot of things his way. It's been publicly reported that some of the things he did in the agencies, he did on his own. And I think there's been some tension over time between the president's staff and Elon Musk over how he handled Doge. Successful, yes, found a lot of cuts, but he ran Doge like he runs a business. He blows things up, and that's uncomfortable in politics, right? Because even though this president is doing more than any president to shake things up, there's also agencies and systems that are in place even for President Trump that Elon Musk did not adhere to. Also, I think the last straw was Mr. Musk's opposition to the One Big Beautiful Bill. I think someone who's negotiated legislation, there's no such thing as a perfect bill. Speaker Johnson and President Trump negotiated the best deal they could, got it through the House, and now it's in the Senate's lap. And I think Mr. Musk and Elon's entitled to his opinion on the bill, but it certainly wasn't helpful to the president. And then as far as the back and forth, I actually thought President Trump was pretty restrained in the way he handled the back and forth. He showed some discipline, and I think just if you're looking at the back and forth, I think the president came out on top looking more reasonable, given how he handled some of the back and forth with Elon Musk. All we can hope is that they're moving forward and some of this truce will not, this truce will stay and we won't see this played out of social media anymore.
Yeah, I feel like the words that come out of Donald Trump's mouth when there's a microphone in front of his face tend to be more restrained than the keyboard strokes when he's dictating posts to Truth Social or to X. It's like he uses the flamethrower there, but then there's a little more diplomacy when the words are actually coming out of his mouth and he's surrounded by reporters.
I think so. And look, everything President Trump does is intentional. I think people who didn't realize that in the past, I think are accepting that. If he's fanning the flames, he's doing it on purpose. If he's more restrained, he's doing it on purpose. Certainly he listens to his staff, but a lot of what the president does is what the president thinks and does in that moment.
It really is a fascinating dynamic. You talked about Doge and the cuts and the things that were identified, but also there being kind of a Lone Ranger aspect to that. Is it the most recent clear illustration that campaigning and governing are not remotely the same thing?
They are very different. It is harder to govern than it is to campaign. With that said, I think this president is attempting to do the big items he campaigned on in the first 180 days, or at least the first year. And that's why you see him pushing so much out in aggressive posture. It is really, really hard to pass an agenda and get hard things done during election year. Where in June, by the time we get to November and December, we will start midterm elections. And so I think you're seeing him try and deliver on immigration, the economy, the trade imbalance, things like that as quick as he can, because it is hard to do that if we don't get it done in 2025.
There's no question about that. It gets late in a hurry with our election cycles now. Quick thought before the break, and then I want you to take us inside the way governors' associations work on the other side of the timeout, because there was a pretty fascinating statement of unanimity from the Democrat Governors Association last night with regard to what's going on in California. But I think the last time we talked about how the court system trying to keep up with what was going on right now was like drinking out of a fire hose, right? You had district courts all over the place issuing rulings. The docket at the Supreme Court was backed up. There have been people who have not been entirely pleased with the Supreme Court and some of the decisions that have come down. In the balance, though, is the Supreme Court siding more with the president or more with the district court judges?
Well, I think it's a draw. I think you're seeing some decisions aligned with the president and some not. And it really is hard sometimes to guess where they're going to land. Today's a big day. You have the president's team working on a response to the latest court decision on his trade power, if you will, while they're also negotiating a second negotiation with China and London. So I think it remains to be seen. I certainly think that the balance of power is better than it was, and that's a we owe thanks to President Trump and Senator McConnell for passing so many conservative judges. We certainly don't get every court case that we want, but it's certainly better than it would have been or could have been years ago.
Is it possible that if we look into the future 20 years, that we say, okay, the fact that not every decision went Donald Trump's way at the Supreme Court is actually a good thing, because we don't want a court, depending on the way it's shaped in the future, where every single decision goes one way or the other along political lines?
Look, I'm a Republican, but I believe in the separation of power. We want our courts to be independent. And I think either side tends to weaponize where the Supreme Court is. But the reality is they're independent, and they make decisions we like sometimes and decisions we don't like. And I personally believe that we're still in a world where we have separation of power. And that's a very good thing for our country.
More with Marie Sanderson coming up. GOP strategist, former policy director with the Republican Governors Association. We're back with you right after this. It's Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Glad to be with you on this Monday morning. Hope your week is off to a good start. It's not necessarily taking the kids to school, but you still got to get that week going, and we're glad to be starting the week with you. Marie Sanderson is my guest. GOP strategist, former policy director with the Republican Governors Association. So I said I wanted to talk to you about this. Most of us that are either talking into a microphone right now or listening on the radio or online have never sat in a strategy session with the Governors Association. You've got 50 individuals who were elected to lead their states. There are more Republican governors than there are Democrat governors. But when you're trying to build consensus between that many people with that many constituents in their respective states, how hard is it to get everybody on the same page? And I ask that in light of the statement that comes out from the DGA yesterday, where all of the Democrat governors sign on in opposition to Donald Trump sending the National Guard to California.
Well, traditionally, a little bit of history, the governors did not really act as a caucus, if you will, a group of like-minded, of the same party governors until probably 2008. And the history lesson on that goes back to our own Governor Haley Barbour. When President Obama became president, Governor Barbour rightly said we should be a firewall. We should be the last group of elected officials blocking bad things from happening in the states. And he was ascending into power at the Republican Governors Association. And he said, and brought me in and said, Marie, I want us to figure out how to create a policy arm of the Republican Governors Association where we fight bad things. And back then we fought Obamacare. We filed an amicus brief against Obamacare. We fought all the energy regulations that they were pushing out to make it harder to produce energy, et cetera. And what has happened is you've seen since 2008, you've seen the governors act like a caucus. It's much easier to act like a caucus when you have a boogeyman. And so right now the Democrats have President Trump, and it's easier to be on the same page when you have something to be against. And so that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing the Democrats, as we said at the earlier segment, they see an opening in this immigration policy. They think that things are trending back their way, that they can get this voting bloc back. And it's a good thing to be together against the president on immigration. And so that's what you're seeing the governors do at the DGA.
I think you said earlier, and don't let me misconstrue your words, but with this particular issue that the Democrats saw an opening and they've kind of pounced on it. How can that be true? Like how can a rational mind see that? Because what I see when I see these images are campaign ads against Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass and everybody else. Like, hey, they're standing here with this car burning on the split screen saying, hey, there's nothing to see here. Hey, this is just a peaceful protest and it's Trump's fault. And yet, while in leadership, that's happening on their watch. How does the mind get there? Because I'm having trouble following.
Well, the images certainly are not favorable to Democrats. I think they see things happening with the Cuban population in Florida, and they believe that as the president deports certain people, that the American people will be sympathetic. I think, in my opinion, is that's not going to be true. We know in the election that immigration was the number one issue for voters. And so I think at its purest sense, maybe the Democrats were trying to message on federalism. Don't send the National Guard into my state. I can control my own state, and clearly. Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass were not getting the job done in California. But I think the politics on the president's side, he is going hard on immigration. We talked about in the last segment that he only has a year really to do the hard stuff. I would put immigration in that bucket, and getting immigration done in a meaningful way. We'll have some politics. He's not going to make everybody happy.
Did Gavin Newsom, did he miscalculate when he dared Tom Homan to come arrest him?
I think so. Look, Gavin Newsom, he's going to run for president. There's a saying that all press is good press, even bad press, and he's obviously trying to make a name for himself in this instance and not look weak compared to President Trump.
Well, and he's tried to soften the edges a little bit with some of his podcast stuff and some seemingly rational conversations, but then when crisis hits, the true colors show through, and it doesn't take long at all.
No, it doesn't. Look, the Democrats are doing a lot of soul searching. There was an article I read earlier today about them trying to attract white males, and they're going on a tour to try and do a listening tour about what white males need to see. And the initial feedback is Democrats are weak and Republicans are strong. So, how do they act stronger? Well, Gavin Newsom's attempting to be strong, right? And I'm not sure it's working.
Oh, me. I think one of the things that came of that was they wanted to advertise on video games. I think I saw that was one of the strategies for attracting male voters. Marie, always appreciate your time. The conversation is always fun, and wish you well. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you. Have a great week, Richard.
Marie Sanderson, former policy director with the Republican Governors Association. She's a GOP strategist. 8 o'clock hour coming up with you. It's Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk, Mississippi.